Hello again, everyone. I'm Chris, and welcome back to another episode of Chris's Checklist. In case you're new or didn't see the last episode, this is basically an unscripted video review series where I go down a list of games that I made on my phone that I played maybe a few hours of, didn't finish for some reason, but wanted to return to. And I'll go down the list one by one and make a video about each once I complete it, or once I decide that I'm not going to complete it because I don't like it. So last time we did an episode on Hollow Knight. I really liked that game. I'm really glad I returned to it. And at the end of that video, I said that I was going to probably do Rayman 2 for the next episode because I'd started playing it again and I was enjoying myself. And I still plan to do Rayman 2 fairly soon. But we're going to take a little detour first and talk about Halo 1 for the original Xbox. So, Halo, I was not planning on finishing this soon. I'll get into why a little bit later, but I finished it, and it was on my list, so I figured I might as well talk about it now. So, without further ado, this is Halo 1. Alright, so I'm fairly certain I don't need to explain to you what Halo is. It's one of the most popular and most revolutionary shooters of all time. And my history with the franchise has mostly been through playing multiplayer at friends' houses. I would go over to a friend's house that had Xboxes, and we would just play like Deathmatch and Oddball and stuff like that. And that was always a lot of fun. And that was mainly the reason why I wanted to get the games in the first place, because I never had an Xbox. And I didn't really have any interest in owning an Xbox outside of being able to play Halo, because I didn't know you could play the first game on PC until recently. So a few years back, I got an Xbox at a flea market for really cheap, and then after that I bought Halo 1 and 2 to play on it. And I did mostly stick to just playing the multiplayer with friends after that, but I did want to play through the campaign now that I had actually owned the games and I could do that. But I think the reason why I didn't really finish it until recently was because I mainly played it as a co-op game. So my dad and I, we really like to play cooperative shooters together. We played Resistance Fall of Man together. It's not really a shooter, but we played Portal 2's co-op together on PS3. And both of those were really fun. And we had always wanted to play Halo together, but we never had the Xbox to do it. So when I finally did get the Xbox a few years ago, we decided we were going to play through the game together. But we just kind of did it in chunks over the course of a year or two, because it was kind of hard to always get like our schedules lined up to where we could play together, and we really only played when we were both the only ones in the house and we had nothing better to do. So that ended up happening again last night, which is why I said earlier that I wasn't expecting to complete it so soon, because I wasn't expecting to play it last night, but I did, and we finally finished it and made it to the end. And so now I can finally share my full thoughts on the full experience. So, first of all, I should probably get out of the way first that I don't think Halo 1 is as amazing as most people seem to think it is, in terms of just the campaign. And also, I'm mostly going to be focusing on the single-player campaign, just because that's the part of the game that you finish, and this is a game about me. This is a series about me finishing games. So, in terms of the single-player campaign alone, I don't think it's that the game hasn't aged well. I just think there's certain aspects of it that aren't that well designed, and I'll explain why. But in terms of what I did like, which is a lot, I really liked the beginning and the end of the game. Like the beginning when you first get to explore Halo and you get to ride around in the Warthog. That's especially great in a co-op experience, just getting to explore that vast area. I really enjoyed those first few areas of the game before you start getting into the more like industrial environments that are more enclosed. And the game's ending sequence is amazing. It's so much fun, and it's really nerve-wracking, but it's also really exciting at the same time. I won't really talk about it in case you haven't played it, but that was really exciting. And there's a few of those moments sprinkled throughout the rest of the game, but for the most part, I mainly found the beginning and the end were the very best parts of the game, and then everything in between wasn't as impressive, in my opinion. And the main reason for that is that a lot of the levels in between are more enclosed. Like, there are some open areas, but mainly it's just hallways with enemies populating them, and you kind of have to just figure out what you're going to do to be able to stay alive in those enclosed environments. And that is an interesting gameplay concept, but I just found that it was reused too many times throughout the game. And in fact, a lot of things are reused too many times throughout the game. So many of the levels go on for a really long time, like longer than I would have liked. And a lot of them feel like they're just copying and pasting the same area just back to back to back, and you're just going through it in a straight line. Not literally, but it's very linear, and that's not a problem, but it's just the environments feel very samey, and you start to feel like you're just replaying the same area over and over and over again, because all of the environments in a specific level seem to be identical until you get to the end. And that kind of bothered me, especially in levels like the library, which seem to go on like forever, just because it seems like the same area over and over and over again. And then aside from the fact that it reuses the same environments, it doesn't really shake things up too much throughout the course of the game. It's basically the same thing until you get to the end, where you're walking down these linear hallway levels and just shooting enemies. And, you know, every once in a while they'll introduce, like, a new enemy or, like, something else, but there isn't really any new gameplay concepts introduced to keep things fresh in the samey environments, which I feel like it kind of needed in order to save it from that. And it seems like the escalation in difficulty just comes from having more enemies spawn. Like, there are a few enemies that show up later that are more difficult to beat, but mainly it's just like you'll get to a new area and there'll just be like tons and tons and tons of enemies, and you just have to hold them off until they're all gone. I think some areas infinitely spawn enemies, but I'm not entirely sure about that. It just seemed that way because there's so many enemies in some areas. And the core gameplay is fun. The shooting mechanics are really well done. I really like only being able to carry 2 weapons at a time, and just the controls and everything. It's all fine, but I just felt like, especially once I got to the end of it, it was just becoming really repetitive, and that made me glad that I had played the game in chunks over a course of time, because I feel like I would have gotten sick of it really fast if I had just played the game from beginning to end. I think aside from that, my only other real issue is just that the Xbox in some areas doesn't seem like it's powerful enough to handle what Bungie wanted it to. Like, there are some enemies there's some areas that have just so many enemies packed into a tight space, and if you try to, like, fight them all off or, like, throw a grenade or something, the game lags significantly, and that can be really annoying because you won't really be able to, like, move or see where you're gonna go, and then you'll get killed because you couldn't, like, defend yourself properly. And that was annoying a few times. It wasn't a huge issue throughout the playthrough because there aren't a lot of moments where that happens, but it's definitely noticeable when it pops up. But now that we've got all that out of the way, let me talk about more in depth the things that I like about it. So I mentioned before, the beginning and the end sequences are amazing. Like, it kicks off the game amazingly, and then it ends it with a bang. And those environments, if they made up the entirety of the game, I think this would be one of my favorite shooters of all time. And I don't play a lot of shooters, so maybe that's not saying much, but I would have enjoyed it a lot more if those types of environments took up a larger portion of the game. Like I said, I really like the shooting mechanics. I really like the controls. The story I wasn't that interested in, but, you know, it gets the job done, and I'm sure that it gets more interesting as the games continue. And, of course, the saving grace of this game for me is, in fact, the multiplayer. I'm not going to touch too much on the competitive side, just because I already mentioned I had a blast playing it, and I think you will too if you haven't played it. But playing the campaign cooperatively, I feel like added a lot of enjoyment to it that I wouldn't have gotten out of it otherwise. Because if I was playing by myself, I probably would have gotten more annoyed with some of the things that bothered me about it. But it was more fun because I was playing it with my dad, and it kind of made it easier to let those things slide in the grand scheme of things. So, in the end, I am glad that I returned to Halo and finally finished it. I do hope that the Halo 2 campaign fixes some of the issues I had with Halo 1's campaign, and I'm sure it will. I hope so anyway. But as for Halo 1 itself, there is a lot to love about it, and I feel like this game is worth it just for the multiplayer alone. But if you haven't played the campaign, I feel like there's still a lot of fun to be had there. So in the end, I am very glad that I returned to it, and I am looking forward to playing through the Halo 2 campaign. So that's going to about do it for this episode of Chris's Checklist. Once again, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think of these videos in the comments below. Leave a like if you liked it. And hopefully I will see you in the next episode.